guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas, tonight back here with Extra History. Welcome to part 4 of the Crimean War. So this one's called Into the Valley of Death. So I'm guessing this is the charge of the Light Brigade, which was a really bad charge. If you'll just watch, you'll see. So if you guys remember last time with the Battle of Ulma, well, let's just say really bad incompetence up on all parties, you know? And they really don't know the war like, we would know. But anyway, how about we just hop in and see how this, Valley of Death turns out. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
Isle of Wight, England, December 2nd, 1854. The poet Alfred Lord Tennyson sets pen to paper. For weeks, he's read accounts of the Battle of Balaclava and the brave yet wasteful cavalry charge that has captured England's imagination. He writes, half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the Valley of Death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the Valley of Death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. That? There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why. There's but to do and die. Into the Valley of Death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Yet that's not quite how it happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I'll talk about that later.
Thanks so much to Factor for showing us exactly how to make a great dinner happen fast.
So, before we move on, the way he wrote about the Light Brigade charge, yeah, let's be real, pretty sure they weren't just, yeah, get some! We're like, oh god, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the British people tend to really exemplify what we would see as incompetence as heroism, bravery, proud Englishmen charging to face a battle. Yeah, not the case. If you guys remember my back at the South Pole race, yeah, they tend to over-exaggerate the people that die honorably in their eyes. Lest they know that it wasn't that honorable. You'll see. Anywho, let's get back to the war, huh?
October 25th, 1854, Battle of Balaclava. The 500 men of the 93rd Highland Regiment draw themselves up in a line, 2 ranks deep, to repel the Russian cavalry charge. Now, usually, infantry would repel a cavalry charge by forming a square, but their commander, Sir Colin Campbell, believes his troops are too green to accomplish that technical maneuver. This simpler one will maximize their firepower, and they have to hold. That morning, a Russian army of 25,000 had attacked the 6 forts forming the outer defensive line of the Allied position around Balaclava. Now, 4 of those forts are in Russian hands, and the enemy is in danger of cutting off the Allied supply port at Balaclava from the forces besieging Sevastopol 10 miles inland. Campbell and his Highlanders, plus 350 Ottomans on their flanks, are the final defensive line in front of the port. He even called up walking wounded in a desperate attempt to repel the 400 Russian horsemen coming right at them. "There's no retreat from here, men," yells Campbell. "You will die where you stand." On a bluff overlooking the action, war correspondent William Russell sees what seems a tiny force opposing the oncoming cavalry. Later, he will describe it as a thin red streak tipped with steel. The British fire once at 800 yards, a second time at 500, and they're about to fire again right in the faces of the Russians when the cavalry formation breaks up and wheels away. Russell will immortalize them in his reporting, with the group coming to be known as the Thin Red Line, some of the most lauded Allied heroes of the war. Though historians do still debate if the Russian cavalry were just probing and never intended to charge, but it's actually another unit who would get the crowning glory of Russell's coverage, the Light Brigade. Now, the charge of the Light Brigade was a strategically minor event in the wider Crimean War. It neither won nor lost the battle, but it did have an enormous psychic impact. And while the memory of the event and how it was memorialized in print is really what's important here, Rob did also really want to devote a whole episode to giving a blow-by-blow of what actually occurred, so we're gonna do that in a one-off following this series in about 2 weeks, right, Zoe? Well, there you go. However, what you need to know right now is that the charge was never meant to happen. Lord Raglan, looking at the battlefield from an elevated position, ordered the cavalry to charge the heights in front of them to capture a group of guns they could not see. However, he wrote a vague order, handed it to a messenger who explained it poorly, and who managed to offend the cavalry commanders badly enough that they didn't even question what seemed like a nonsensical order. Even to the war correspondent, Russell, with no experience, looking on from an elevated position, it was clear that something had gone wrong. He watched as the 600 men of the Light Brigade dashed across the field, at first assuming that they would turn and attack the guns on the heights or something. But instead, they tore straight down the valley toward a battery of Russian guns over a mile away, exposing themselves to fire not only from the front, but from the artillery on the heights on either side. Russell described it with a mix of awe and dread. The onrushing formation, the fire carving chunks out of their ranks, the way each man's sword flashed like a halo of steel, but the bravery seemed to make the blunder even worse. And when they returned, a full 40% of the Light Brigade had been killed, wounded, captured, or gone missing in 20 minutes of combat. Now, to everyone watching and the public at home in Britain, the charge created mixed emotions. On one hand, Russell's dispatches on the action spurred admiration for the British soldiers, but on the other, it caused contempt for the incompetent aristocrats who had ordered and carried out the charge. The French commanding general Pierre Bosquet summed it up. When watching the action, he declared, "It is magnificent, but it is not war. It is madness." The Russians thought so too. In fact, they came to fear the British cavalry, who they considered lunatics. Russell's dispatch.
That's the psychic impact, because they know, like, these guys, well, in their eyes, were willing to die. Okay, so to put in, like, a modern example, think of them like kamikaze pilots, or, you know, the bonsai charges the Japanese would use. You know, basically, they didn't know when they died, but at least they would try to take some of them out with them, you know? Whether it be dive bombing into the ships with their planes, or just, you know, charging just to, you know, see if they weaken them. Which, you know, brave, but pretty dumb. Let's be real. You know? I'm pretty sure any war general nowadays would tell you, never do a full, like, suicide charge. You need the men. Anyway.
In the Times of London, as well as correspondents reporting from military hospitals, had quickly taken the gloss off the conflict. Now, there was no anti-war movement as such, but the public was increasingly furious about the camp squalor and epidemics their brave soldiers had to endure. News that wounded soldiers were going without treatment for weeks spurred major public debates, and military blunders like the charge of the Light Brigade widened the class divide between the newspaper-reading middle class and the aristocracy, which had a lock on the upper ranks of the military. Of course, it wasn't all down to Russell and the journalists. Ordinary soldiers were making their mark too. They wrote home about the poor conditions, the lack of medical care, and their dislike for their Ottoman allies. Indeed, while transiting through Constantinople, many officers found themselves upset that they were fighting to uphold a government that they considered backward and tyrannical. The Ottomans, for their part, were not loving their alliance either. As their government expected, the French and British treated them as the junior partner to be pushed around, even in their own capital. When the Allies moved into Constantinople, they took over buildings as headquarters, barracks, and hospitals without asking permission, and to stay in the war, the Ottoman government had to take out extortionary loans from the two powers that gave France and Britain enormous economic and political pull in the country. Even on the battlefield, Ottoman troops were disrespected. At Balaclava, Ottoman soldiers had held the heights for hours with minimal support from their allies, with French and British troops only showing up after they'd broken. But because the Ottomans were retreating while the other allies were advancing, the Europeans sneered at them as cowards. The Russians also were displeased with the progress of the war. Tsar Nicholas was increasingly under economic pressure due to the Allied navies blocking trade in the Baltic. Forced to import goods from Prussia at astronomically high prices, the Russian economy was beginning to suffer, and their medical situation was also just as dire as that in the British camp. On the battlefield,
yikes. You know what's bad when your only supply line is giving you extortionate rates? Like, jeez. I don't know what German was thinking, but maybe they thought, you know, if we help them trade, but if we drive them out, well, this might end the war. I don't know who came up with the ideas, but damn, you gotta admit, that is messed up. Anyway.
It was also increasingly clear to Russian soldiers that they were outmatched, poorly equipped, their bureaucracy badly run, and official corruption hobbling their supply efforts. Morale was low. Much like on the British side, aristocratic officers often treated war like a hunting trip and disappeared to lush residences for long periods as the ranks suffered in the field. Then, on November 5th, 1854, Prince Menshikov made his last attempt to break the supply line between Balaclava and the siege works around Sevastopol. 11 days after the Battle of Balaclava, a Russian army 40,000 strong slammed into the 16,000 Allied soldiers. It was known as the Battle of Inkerman. The fighting took place in heavy fog, making central command impossible. Colonels, majors, and captains led this fight, acting purely on initiative, leading it to be nicknamed the Soldiers' Battle. Russian units used ravines to come up on British trenches nearly unseen, and fighting was close, often with bayonets, and one battery of artillery changed hands multiple times. Vastly outnumbered, the Allies only held due to the superiority of British rifles against smoothbore Russian muskets and the intervention of a large French contingent. By the end of the day, 10,000 Russians lay dead, wounded, or captured on the field. So while Balaclava captured the public's romantic imagination, it was Inkerman that was the decisive victory. Menshikov would never again challenge the Allies in the field. Instead, it would now be down to a pure siege. The Siege of Sevastopol and another year of war we'll tell you about next week. Though
I think this actually might be the last year of the war. I don't know for sure, but we'll see how well that siege goes, so... And once we're done with the main series, we won't be covering the Charge of the Light Brigade. You know, like I said, there's definitely a lot more to go to it. But like I said, the British still have a tendency to, exemplify or, heroify. I don't even know how. Or at least, if that's the right word, the failures of some of them. Like we saw during the race to Antarctica's South Pole, the sailing voyage to find the North Passage. Yeah, they do that a lot. Trust me. I actually took a class on that, or part of class. I don't remember if it was the title of the class itself, but I know it was like a subject. That's what I remember. Anyway, enough about that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Till next time, see ya.